long time. Remember when I did It's Time for Another Episode of... Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And yes, I'm back. I am back with my Calgary Stampeders this month. It's been a long damn time, may I say. Season 3, Episode 2. And before you're wondering, how come it's Season 3, Episode 2? Well, last year I decided to do a no season edition. And then I figured out that I'll just continue Season 3 into 2021. Because, hey, we actually have games to talk about and recap. So yeah, it's definitely great to be back, even though it's a little later than I wanted. But at least we'll have something, as this pandemic shortened season for the CFL is a 14-game season. But that also means that it's going to push off the Grey Cup 3 weeks later, which also means that this Calgary sports fan is going to not start thinking and feeling like Christmas till later either. So before I get to recapping the games, this is what I do. If you do want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. And a couple things I'm going to do different now that we're into Season 3, and this is kind of universal for all my game recaps, is I'll put timestamps in the description below if you want to jump to any particular segment or any particular game or any other segments that I do in this game recap. And also I've done differently is that before game days, I've done a game day post where I just, do a selfie with my smartphone, giving my game day post. Usually it's starting to be that I post it up the evening before the game. And then I do have a second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts where I do a quick game recap. But this is more where I do my full game recap, so I appreciate the like and subscribe on my main channel and my second channel. So let's bring up my notes as the Calgary Stampeders finally started their 2021 season. 75th season, by the way, after all, with those, beautiful home jerseys, regardless with the KFC or the Pop Shop or the candy cane or popcorn container memes. They're beautiful. And I think we should do a reverse of that for the roads and go with that full time. So let's bring my notes and let's recap how the first 4 games went. And may I say, it's interesting. So the first game that the Calgary Stampeders finally got to play to finally celebrate their 75th anniversary season, go back to Saturday, August the 7th. This was week 1, and the other unique thing with this schedule is that Calgary has the first 3 games at home. So this was against the Toronto Argonauts at McMahon Stadium for a 5 p.m. kickoff. And as I say, this was the first Calgary Stampeders game in 636 days. That was from the 2019 West CFL loss against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You can also say it was the first time in 622 days if you count the 107th Grey Cup that I was in the stands. And you can also say this was somewhat of a reunion game because there were a lot of former Stampeders on the Toronto Argonauts for this game. And it's one of their secrets on being a better team. So anyway, Calgary actually had that ball first after the opening kickoff, and they started off with a 2-0. And then Toronto, on their first drive, were able to drive down the field and score the opening touchdown. So Toronto did score on their first drive, and they converted on a 2-point conversion to make it an 8-0 game for Toronto midway through the first quarter. It was McLeod Bethel-Thompson who actually started in quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts. Remember, Nick Arbuckle actually is with the Toronto Argonauts now, as he connected with a former Stampeder in Johan Breskison in the end zone on a 9-yard pass, and then it was John White who ran in the 2-point conversion to make it 8-0 for Toronto. Next drive, Calgary did look better, and they were able to move the ball. No more scoring to report after the first quarter. So it was an 8-0 game for Toronto after the first quarter. But Calgary was entering into the red zone as we get into the second quarter. In said second quarter, Calgary was able to get in the red zone, but they weren't able to get a touchdown. But we did settle for a 20-yard field goal for Rene Paredes, so Calgary now made it an 8-3 game for Toronto. At this point, there was 13:24 to go in the first or second quarter, I meant to say. On the next drive, Toronto was at midfield when they attempted a 58-yarder as Boris Beatty, who is now at the Toronto Argonauts. He actually was wide on a 58-yard field goal. Calgary was able to run it out. So it still remained 8-3 Toronto at that point. Next drive, Calgary had their best drive of the game and eventually scored their first touchdown of the game, in my mind. Aided on pass interference penalty early in the drive that kept Calgary going. Bo was able to connect with, I say, our top receiver, and Kamar Jordan on an 8-yard touchdown pass. And it was Markeith Ambles, the other upcoming receiver that they're looking to have more of a bigger impact this season, made a 2-point conversion. So after that touchdown, now it's an 11-8 game for the Calgary Stampeders. This is with 4.5 minutes to go in the second quarter. After Toronto 2-0, Calgary was able to get great field position on a block punt. That was Charlie Moore who blocked it and was able to also recover it. And Calgary set up shop on the Toronto 19-yard line. However, Calgary was only able to settle for a field goal, as it was a 22-yard field goal by Rene Paredes, so we added to the lead to make it 14-8 for Calgary. On the next drive, Toronto was able to move the ball down to the 53rd line, and they was able to punt it with a minute to go in the second quarter. Calgary took a roughing kicking penalty, unfortunately, on that, so Toronto kept the ball. After that, Toronto was able to successfully kick a 54-yard field goal from Boris Beatty, so it was 14-11 for Calgary at halftime. So if Calgary did not have that roughing the kicker penalty, Toronto would have not gotten that chance to kick a field goal. Calgary had a quick 2-and-out to point the ball to Toronto less than a minute ago, and that was it before the halftime, where I guess there was a few more things mentioned. Is that Toronto was actually able to drive the ball down to the Calgary 20-yard line, and attempt a 27-yard field goal, and was wide for a single. So it was actually 14-12 for Calgary at halftime. So there was a couple more changes in possession, and then Toronto actually attempted a shorter field goal that went wide. So it was 14-12 Calgary at halftime. Second and third quarter opened up with Toronto. So I made the second. As we got into the third quarter, Toronto opened up the driveway, getting the opening kickoff, and then it was on the 35-yard line for Calgary. On the next play, this is where it got interesting. Is that Bethel Thompson, he found Ricky Collins Jr. on a long play, and it looked like he was going to go all the way to the end zone until Deshaun Amos, he did this. Boof! He punted the ball out of Ricky Collins Jr. on a forced fumble. So Calgary was able to recover it on their own 25-yard line. So I do remember seeing that all of a sudden. I was like, uh-oh, Toronto's going to start off an early touchdown. And I saw the replay, and it was beautiful to see. Deshaun Amos pumped out the ball. And then Calgary on that next drive, the first drive of the second half, it was Kamar Jordan who had a 39-yard player, but Calgary did get within the red zone, threatening to score. Calgary was looking to go for it on 3rd and 2. On the Toronto third, on the 3-yard line to at least maybe get a first down or a touchdown, but they were stopped. And then there was a challenge to pass interference penalty that was unsuccessful, so ultimately there was a turnover and downs, so Calgary came out with nothing on that drive after all. So that came out empty-handed, and there were still 10 minutes to go in the third quarter. At that point, still 14-12 for Calgary. Toronto next drive ended out with a punt, and Calgary got the ball back with 7 minutes to go. On that drive, when Calgary had the ball, it was Charleston Hughes that took our late roughing the passer penalty, and that was that play that was speculated that ultimately what defined August for my Calgary Stampeders this month is that Bo got hurt. And apparently he did suffer his broken fibula on that play, but he still played through the whole game and the next game before he found out he had the major injury, and then, maybe a new star was born from all this when I get to that game. But then eventually Calgary got into the red zone and ultimately settled for yet another field goal on that same drive. It was a 15-yard for Rene Paredes. So Calgary now had a 17-12 lead with under 4 minutes to go. Third quarter. Both teams exchanged drive to close out the third quarter, so then it remained 17-12 for Calgary going into the fourth quarter. Toronto's first drive ended with a punt, and Calgary was able to take the first drive to lead into Calgary with another field goal. This time from a 30-yarder out. Calgary kicked the 30-yard field goal from Rene Paredes to make it 28-12 for Calgary. And this was 10.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. After the field goal, Toronto had a 2-0. Calgary got the ball back, and the first play, Kadeem Carey fumbled the ball, and it was recovered by yet another former Stampeder, making an impact in Shaq Richardson, and then fumbled the ball and got it on the Calgary 30-yard line. Then on the next possession, after that turnover for Calgary, Toronto scored a touchdown on Curry Grittens Jr. connected on a 27-yard pass from the McLeod Bethel Thompson. And then there was Eric Rogers, yet another former Stampeder, connected on a 2-point conversion. So now, just like that, we had a 20-20 game, tie game, with 7.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Next drive, Toronto was looking to move the ball into Calgary territory in the final minutes of the fourth quarter. So Toronto was able to sustain the long drive after Calgary couldn't do anything after the touchdown. Eventually, Toronto actually took a lead as Boris Beatty, he kicked a 32-yard field goal in the final minute to take a 23-20 lead going into the final minute. Calgary did get the ball back with 31 seconds to go to hopefully maybe get into field goal range. However, Bo threw an interception to Shaq Richardson, and that pretty much sealed the game for the Toronto Argonauts, as it was 23-20. Toronto takes the first game of the season. So Toronto won Week 1, 23-20. A lot of former Stampeders making an impact in this game, as I already mentioned. So now if we look at the stats before we look ahead to the next game. For Calgary, Bo was 25 for 35 on passing. He threw for 252 yards. He had a touchdown and an interception, but that one interception definitely came at the worst time when we were looking to maybe get into field goal range and send this thing to overtime, but that didn't happen. And then Kadeem Carey, he had a good day on the ground as he ran. And 18 carries, he had 75 yards. And then our leading receiver was Kamar Jordan. He had 5 catches for 85 yards, including that one touchdown. Our kicker was Rene Paredes. He was a perfect 4-for-4. His longest was a 30-yarder. We settled for a lot of short field goals in this game. As I say, was another reason why we did not come out on the right end of this one. On the defensive side of the ball, you had Jameer Thurman and Raheem Wilson. Each had 5 tackles, but I got to highlight Deshaun Amos with the 3 tackles and that, boom, one forced fumble. That could have taken a touchdown away from Toronto to start off the third quarter. So on the Toronto side of the ball, it was McLeod Bethel Thompson, who wasn't quarterback. He had a much better game. He was 26 for 37. On passing, he threw for 354 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The leading rusher for Toronto was Jonathan White, who had 9 carries, 28 yards. And then Ricky Collins Jr., while aided on that big play that eventually Deshaun Amos punched out, he had 6 catches for 126 yards. Boris Beatty, well, was asked to call on a couple of long field goals. He was 2 for 4, but he made that one from 54 yards. And then he won Noamba, Dexter Coyle, and Jeff Richards each had 6 tackles. So that was the Week 1 against the Toronto Argonauts. So Week 2, this was on Thursday, August the 12th. The Calgary Stampeders were still at home. This time taking on the BC Lions at 7:30 kickoff at McMahon Stadium. So they had a very short week after a very, very long, pandemic off season. And this was the game that Bo Levi Mitchell still wasn't feeling right. Still was feeling sore from the ill effects from the Charleston Hughes roughing the passer penalty, but it wasn't quite healed, but he still played through it. So how this one started off is BC received the opening kickoff, but had a 2-and-out to open up. Calgary on their first drive was able to move the ball, but it also ended off with a punt. So this game definitely set a tone that this was likely going to be a defensive struggle, and it's what ultimately was. BC on the next drive was able to connect on a few big plays, including their top 2 receivers, and luckily Whitehead and Brian Burnham. BC got to the Calgary 15 to attempt a field goal, but it was wide left by Takeru Yamasaki, who was the Japanese kicker that BC picked up on the global draft. And actually, he struggled in Week 1 and in this game, and ultimately, this was a sidebar that Takeru Yamasaki actually got released after this game. And then there's one point in the play that I'm going to say that they probably didn't have confidence in him on their decision late in the game. But anyway, he at least got a single out of it. So it was 1-0 for BC at that point. And Calgary on the next drive did get into the red zone, but ultimately came up short of the BC 17 as Calgary could not get a quarterback sneak in. As it was Michael O'Connor, who was in for the short yardage play on third down, got stopped. So Calgary came up with nothing on that play. With 2.5 minutes to go, BC started to get down to the BC 16-yard line and be able to get to the Calgary 13-yard line. So they had a nice long drive with 2.5 minutes to go in the first quarter, starting at their own 16, getting to the Calgary 13. And they attempted a field goal on the final play of the first quarter. This time, as Takeru Yamasaki was successful for 20 yards. So in the last play of the first quarter, BC had a 4-0 lead. Calgary was able to get on the board on the next drive as Rene Paredes kicked a 48-yarder field goal to now make it a 4-3 game for the BC Lions. On the next drive, BC was able to sustain a drive and open up scoring as Michael Rowley scored on a sneak, and James Butler ran in the 2-point conversion to open up the score. So we had a 12-3 BC lead with 10 minutes to go in the second quarter. After a couple of drives and butts, Calgary did have the ball with eventually 3 minutes to go. But Bo, who had a rough game in this game, threw his first interception as his Marcus Sales scored and returned the ball to midfield. So Bo threw his first interception late in the first half in the second quarter. BC did not score in that turnover, and both sides traded sides, but the game remained 12-3 for BC at halftime. As I mentioned, this was also the Hall of Fame game where Calgary was recognizing players that got inducted in the 2020-21 CFL Hall of Fame classes. I made videos on that. You can look at that. So going into the second half, third quarter, Calgary opened up with the 2-and-out after they received the kickoff. And then on the next drive, BC eventually ended Calgary stopping by BC on the 20-yard, on a short yardage play. So we kind of had some payback on the BC Lions after what happened to Calgary in the first half. Next play, major play in the third quarter, did not happen until with 7.5 minutes to go, as it was Lamar Durant who fumbled the pass at the BC 24 and was recovered by Jonathan Moxley after Royce Metchie forced it out. So the third quarter was definitely a punter's duel, if I should say. This game was a defensive struggle. However, on that drive, Bo threw his second interception right after getting the ball back from the fumble, as he threw it to another Bo, as in Bo Lecumbo, giving BC the ball back on their 44-yard line. Actually, there was no scoring to report in the third quarter, so we still had a 12-3 game for the BC Lions, but Calgary definitely did not look good, and Bo definitely did not look himself. In retrospect, we might know why. So going into the fourth quarter, Calgary did attempt it's 12-3 for BC. Calgary did attempt a 40-yard field goal by Vernon Perez on the first play of the fourth quarter to make it a 12-6 game for BC. So Calgary at least had the ball and kicked a field goal. And then on the next drive, BC was able to get down to the Calgary 22-yard line, as was Takiri Yamasaki was good on 29 yards to make it 15-6 for BC. With 11.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. This game was just waiting for something big to happen in the second half, but ultimately didn't happen. Calgary did look good on the next drive. They were able to do something and looked like they were threatening to score. However, when Calgary got into the red zone, Bo once again was intercepted by Curante Harden, and it looked like in that play, now in retrospect we might know why, that Bo, when he threw that interception, it looked like he could have ran for maybe a first down or run it into the end zone. But he didn't, but Calgary threw yet another third interception. So once again, they were within the red zone and came up empty-handed. And then Calgary did get BC deep in their own territory to soften the low to get the ball back. But on the Calgary possession, Calgary did get to the BC 12-yard line. But the way this game went, they settled for a 20-yard field goal, and they were successful. So now the game was 15-9 for BC. And this was with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. On the next possession, BC were able to take some time off the clock and attempt a field goal, but Takiro Yamasaki was wide on the field goal. So it's still 15-9 as Calgary was able to run out the return. So it's still 15-9. On the next play, after we got the ball, thinking maybe he still has some hope, Bo threw his fourth interception of the game, this time to Jalen Anderson Cooper's going deep, and BC was able to get the ball in the final minute. And then at the Calgary 36-yard line, so BC was in field goal range, and it was third down for BC. And they gambled and turned the ball over, giving Calgary the ball. I think this was the point where BC was losing faith in Takiro Yamasaki, so they gambled on the Calgary 36-yard line because it was third and more than one. And most teams, if they had confidence in their kicker, would have attempted the field goal to make it a 2-score game, but they gambled and lost. So Calgary was able to get the ball at their own 36-yard line. So 30 seconds left, trying to go for the miracle. Calgary tried to get a miracle pass, but came up short. So ultimately, they lost this one 15-9 to drop to 0-2. So things are not looking good. As I say, the highlight of this game for me as a Calgary Stampeder fan was Bo. He definitely did not look good. He was 21 of 38. He threw for 209 yards, had no other touchdowns, but 4 interceptions. That definitely was not a good game for Bo. Now we kind of know why, in retrospect. Rushing the ball, Kadeen Carey, he had 11 carries for 48 yards. And then Kamar Jordan, he had 3 catches for 68 yards. Rene Paredes, he was 3 for 3 for kicking, his longest was 48 yards. And then Darnell Sankey, one of the top rookies so far for the Calgary Stampeders, led the way with 8 tackles. So on the BC side of the ball, it was Mike O'Reilly, who was 26-33 for passing, 342 yards. No touchdowns or interceptions, but he ran one in himself, so it was the only touchdown in the game. Grace Rainey had 6 carries for 43 yards on the ground. And then Brian Burnham led the way receiving, 4 carries for 121 yards, but I also note that Lucky Whitehead, he had 6 catches for 108 yards. And then Tahir Yamasaki, he was 2 for 4 in kicking, and his longest was 29 yards. And then Anthony Shiovi and Bo Combo led the way with 6 tackles each. So that was the week 2 against the Calgary Stampeders and the BC Lions. So week 3, this happened on Friday, August the 20th. The Calgary Stampeders were still at home against the Montreal Alouettes, 3rd straight go, and this was the week that Calgary ultimately put Bo Levi Mitchell on the 6-game injured list, and I was definitely a little nervous in this one, and all week it sounded like it was Michael O'Connor that was going to be the starting quarterback, because he was listed as the backup for the first couple weeks of the season, but ultimately it was Jake Maier who got the starting job in practice, and it was his first professional start. And how this game started, it looked like, oh boy, this is going to be a long season, but you'll like it till the end that maybe this game has shown that maybe we've got a guy behind Bo if we have to go a long period without Bo. So anyway, Calgary received the opening kickoff, and Jake Maier, he looked shaky on his first pass and got almost intercepted by Wes Sutton, given that he was making his first professional start. There were a lot of running plays, and Calgary was able to get the lead as on the aid of Kadeen Carey's strong running. Calgary was able to get into field goal range. So Rene Paredes kicked the 39-yarder to make Calgary up 3-0 on the opening drive. Montreal's opening drive ended off with a 2-and-out, so Calgary once again had the ball again, and then on just about 10.5 minutes to go in the first quarter, I guess Wes Sutton was meant to get an interception from Jake Maier, as he did get an interception from Jake Maier, so Calgary was back on defense after the field goal and the 2-and-out by Montreal. On the next drive, Montreal did eventually score a touchdown, taking 6 minutes off the clock in the first quarter, as Vernon Adams Jr. connected to Jake Winnipeg on a 9-yard pass to make it 7-3, as David Cote kicked at the point after, so it was 7-3 Montreal with just over 4 minutes to go in the first quarter. On the next drive, Jake Maier did find Markeith Ambles on a 45-yard play to maybe give him some confidence and show that maybe there's still some hope, pushing Calgary into the Montreal. However, on the Montreal 14-yard line, Jake Maier did throw another interception, but I felt with this play, if you look at that play, he was under pressure, he was rushed, and the ball was tipped a few times, but ultimately came to the interception as it went to Darius who picked up the interception deep in Calgary or Montreal territory. So ultimately we came up nothing on that. On that drive, Montreal started on their 24-yard line, went to the Calgary 45-yard line to end the first quarter with Montreal leading 7-3. Going into the second quarter, while still having possession, heading into the second quarter, Montreal did ultimately score on that turnover. It started all the way deep in the Calgary territory as William Stanback, the run back, runs in a 3-yard touchdown, and then with the point after, Montreal had a 14-3 lead going in early in the second quarter, 12 minutes to go. So things were not looking good for Calgary at this point, as we were with Jake Maier making his first professional start, Bo on the sideline, and Calgary down 14-3. Next drive for Calgary ended off with a 2-and-out, thinking at that time, especially fans around me, we're all thinking that we're probably going to see Michael O'Connor soon. However, I felt on the next drive, this is where I felt things changed. Because if this did not happen, we might have be talking about a different football game. However, in the next drive, eventually Montreal, things turned around for Calgary. First, Montreal got 2 plays for over 20 yards. We're threatening again to get into Calgary territory on William Stanback run and a Jake Winnipeg pass, getting Montreal to the Calgary 47-yard line. However, on the next play, Vernon Adams Jr. threw an interception to Royce Metchie that he caught and got the ball to the Calgary 25-yard line. So Vernon Adams Jr. was definitely sensing long plays, but Royce Metchie caught an interception and Calgary Stampeders shot up on the 25-yard line, which I felt this could have been one of the turning points of the game. On the next drive, Jake Maier was able to connect to Josh Huff and Mike Keith Ambles, moving Calgary down the field. After a Colton Hunchuk pass that got Calgary onto the 1-yard line, it was Kadeem Carey who runs in the touchdown, but failed on the 2-point conversion. But after that drive, I felt, things were looking better for Calgary. So Calgary made it a 14-9 game for Montreal, but Jake Maier looked better and made a case to stay in after 3 minutes to go in the second quarter, and that was the first touchdown Calgary had since the Kamar Jordan pass, if you go back to the Toronto game. So after Montreal got stopped in the next drive, Calgary was able to get the ball back and be able to get another score, as it was a 52-yarder by Rene Paredes. So now Calgary made it a 14-12 game for Montreal with just over a minute and a half to go. After both sides exchanged drives, we had a 14-12 game Montreal at halftime. So after a shaky first quarter by Jake Maier, things are looking better. So what does the third quarter and the fourth quarter have in store for this game? Well, this got very interesting. Third quarter, Montreal received the kickoff, but had a quick 2-and-out. Both sides drives at each end of the game with punts. So the game remained 14-12 for Montreal going into the final 5 minutes of the third game, as this game was turning into yet another defensive struggle, but I felt things opened up. After that, on the Calgary drive, Calgary was able to benefit on a roughing the passer penalty, and eventually Calgary was able to score their second touchdown of the game. As one thing that got apparent in the second half of the game is Montreal took a lot of bad penalties that prolonged drives, as Jake Maier threw his first touchdown to Kamar Jordan on a 4-yard play, and then the point after is good. So now Calgary had a 19-14 lead with just over 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. After the Calgary kickoff, Montreal pinned deep in their own territory. Montreal eventually conceded a safety when they were going to punt the ball away. So now Calgary is up 21-14 in the final minute of the third quarter. Calgary had the ball heading into the fourth quarter up 21-14, but did punt the ball midfield after the opening minute. After Montreal was stopped and punted the ball away back to Calgary, the highlight of the game happened. As maybe there's more confidence in Jake Maier, is that razzle-dazzle play where Jake Maier completed an 85-yard play to Josh Hupp down the field, got Calgary down to the Montreal 1-yard line, and eventually, after several penalties, Calgary eventually was able to score a 1-yard touchdown by Kadeem Carey, and then the point after. So Calgary was up 28-14 with 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. On the next drive, Montreal was able to sustain a drive and worked the Calgary defense to attempt a 52-yard field goal, but it was short. But Calgary conceded a singles, I should say. So now it was 28-15 for Calgary. However, things really started getting interesting after that, as on the next drive, Calgary fumbled the ball on a snap that went off Jake Maier as he ran in front of the center, as Jake Maier called the ball, and then Montreal eventually recovered the ball at the Calgary 40-yard line. And then on that drive high with the Gene Lewis catch, Vernon Adams Jr. was able to connect with Quan Bray on a 10-yard pass, and David Cote connected on the point after. So now it's a 28-22 game. So Montreal definitely scored 2 touchdowns on 2 Calgary turnovers in this game. So it's 28-22 Calgary with under 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Calgary had 2-and-out, had to punt the ball, giving away to Montreal to give them a chance to go down the field. With just over a minute and a half to go, it was 1:44 on the clock that Montreal had the ball. And Montreal was able to drive the ball down the field, looking like to threaten to score very late. So definitely needed to stay to the end for this game. It literally came down to the final play when Montreal ran out of time and room to get the ball in the end zone, as it got down to the Calgary 1-yard line, ending this one on a 28-22 win. So the receiver had his feet in the end zone, but the ball was out at the 1, and that's where the referees judged the play, and he just ran out of the room. And so Calgary definitely came down to the final play, the final yard, but Calgary got their first win of the season by winning 28-22, and Jake Maier gets his first professional win after a slow first quarter. So good job for Jake Maier. So the Calgary stats, well, Jake Maier, who was the story of this game, he was 16-29 for passing. He threw for 304 yards, had a touchdown and 2 interceptions, but those 2 interceptions came in the first half. Then when it comes to the rushing the ball, Kadeem Carey, he had 14-62 yards, 14 carries and 60 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then the receivers, well, Josh Huff led the way with 5 catches for 120 yards, including that razzle-dazzle play. Markeith Ambrose also had 5 catches for 113 yards, so those are the two receivers that definitely helped out with Jake Maier's debut. And then Rene Paredes was 2 for 2 with a 52-yarder as his longest. And Darnell Sankey led the team in tackles with 7. So on the Montreal side of the ball, Vernon Adams Jr., he was 20 for 42 for passing, so he definitely didn't have his best game in this one. Where 261 yards passing, he had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Then rushing the ball, Montreal had a pretty good game rushing the ball, as it was William Stanback. He had 82 yards rushing on 15 carries and 1 touchdown, and Vernon Adams Jr.'s. He also had 8 carries for 65 yards, so Vernon Adams Jr. is definitely an exciting quarterback when he's on. He's definitely an exciting player to watch. And then the leading receiver was Jake Maier, who had 8 catches for 106 yards, so there were 2 Jakes that definitely stood out in this game. David Cote, he only had 1 attempt for a field goal, was 0 for 1. The leading receiver, or defensive player for tackles, was Tycone Glass. He had 6 tackles. So that was the Calgary-Montreal game for Week 3. So Calgary started off the season 1-2 for the first 3 games at home. So Week 4, this will be the first game, the final game for August, as the Calgary Stampeders were making their first road game as they were taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This happened on Sunday, August the 29th, as this game was a 5 p.m. kickoff. 5 p.m. Mountain at IG Field against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. As mentioned, first game on the road in the season and first matchup since the 2019 Western semifinal loss. And then the other questions we can ask for this game is, what does Jake Maier do on his second start? And also to note that Andrew Harris for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, he draws into the lineup after sustaining an injury at the start of the year. So those are the storylines coming in this game. Winnipeg did receive the opening kickoff and did not score on the opening drive. And then Calgary got the ball for the first time with 12 minutes to go in the first quarter. And unlike the previous game for Jake Maier, he looked great for this one as he was dialed in. After taking 6 minutes off the clock, Calgary did score the first on a field goal by Rene Paredes from 35 yards, and Calgary made it 3-0 at that point. However, on the next drive, Winnipeg did answer back in a big way with a 50-yard passing play to Rasheed Bailey, which ultimately set up Andrew Harris running for a touchdown 2 yards out. So, however, Winnipeg did not connect on the point after. So Winnipeg now took a 6-3 lead with just over 3.5 minutes to go in the first quarter, setting up another big play defensive struggle game for both sides. Calgary was able to get some plays in heading into the final minute in the first quarter, but punted the ball away to Winnipeg, and Winnipeg took possession. So they were still up 6-3 with the ball going in the second quarter, up 6-3. After Winnipeg punted the ball back to Calgary in the opening minute of the second quarter, Calgary was able to keep the ball moving with Jake Maier completing every pass. Eventually, Calgary did get a field goal, this time for 39 yards out, as the defense is definitely bended but didn't break in this game. So after 39-yard field goal, Calgary ties up the game at 6-6. Just over 10.5 minutes to go in the second quarter. After Winnipeg 2-0, Calgary did get the ball back in their own end zone and in their own end, and bizarreness happened. Want to explain what happened here? Calgary decided to go for a third and short play. However, it wasn't just a sneak. It was Jake Maier. He was successful, and he passed to Josh Huff, who turned it into a 41-yard play. But Mike Jones from Winnipeg forced a fumble that Adam Bighill recovered at the Calgary 49-yard line. So ultimately, in that play, you could say it was a bad pooch punt. But it looked good that Calgary pulled off third and short, not just going for the sneak, but then this plan, you could say, maybe backfired a bit, because after 2 plays, Winnipeg settled for a field goal attempt as Mark Lego was good from 50 yards out, giving Winnipeg a 9-6 lead with 6 minutes to go in the second quarter. So they were able to at least soften the blow from that turnover, but that was demoralizing how that play turned out. And even Dave Dickinson was like, "You gotta be kidding me, man." So anyway, on the next drive, Calgary was able to answer back as Jake Maier connected on his perfect first half with all passes completed. Eventually, Kadeem Carey ran as a 17-yard touchdown and the point after being good. So Calgary took a 13-9 lead with 3.5 minutes to go in the second quarter. After both teams exchanged drives, the game remained 13-9 for Calgary at halftime, and Jake Maier, he actually completed 16 consecutive passes. So that was definitely impressive. Looks like we have some depth behind Bo. from Jake Maier. Calgary received the kickoff to start out the second half. Jake Maier completed one more pass before his first incompletion on that drive. So if you're following, he made 17 consecutive complete passes, which, believe it or not, it's a franchise record. Jake Maier in his second start entered the Calgary Stampeders record books, and this team had definitely a lot of stellar quarterbacks, so that's definitely impressive for Jake Maier. After that, the third quarter and the second half proved to be a defensive struggle for both sides even more. Things definitely locked down much more in the second half. With just under 10 minutes to go, some controversy where it looked like Winnipeg had a touchdown when Zach Collaros connected with Kenny Lawler, but automatic review said Deshaun Amos ruled him down at the Calgary 43-yard line, which ultimately he got hurt on that play, but that was the controversial moment of that game. Winnipeg on that drive did sell for a field goal eventually as they kicked the 42-yard to make it a 13-12 game for Calgary. And that was actually all the scoring in the third quarter. So ultimately, both sides kept the strong defense going. So it was 13-12 for Calgary going into the fourth quarter. Calgary in the fourth quarter, the next score did not come until with under 6 minutes to go. So it definitely remained a strong defensive game. So with under 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, it was Mark Lego who kicked the 37-yard field goal to make it 15-13 for Winnipeg. At that point, point out that Calgary did take some penalties in the fourth quarter. That prolonged some tries, and then there was one roughing the passer penalty that Calgary took in the final minute. It wasn't as bad as the Montreal did in the game before, but there were definitely some untimely penalties that definitely helped Winnipeg in this game, as we'll get to what happened at the end. Next drive, Calgary did answer back with a field goal of their own as Rene Paredes kicked a 33-yarder to make it 16-15 for Calgary with 1:52 to go in the fourth quarter. Note this was the first points that Winnipeg gave up in the fourth quarter at that point of the 2021 CFL season. After the kickoff, Winnipeg got the ball at their own 28-yard line. Winnipeg did get into Calgary territory, which was also aided with a roughing the passer penalty in the final minute, which definitely could have changed the game and how the game ended. Winnipeg did settle for a field goal with 40 seconds to go. And interestingly was that the field goal that Mark Lego made was from the 45-yard line, taking time count after a time count penalty. What was significant is that the 35-yarder that Mark Lego had before taking the time clock penalty or the time count penalty was wide. So in this case, it was a good thing he took a time count penalty because he was good from 45 yards. So after all that, Calgary now was down by 2 as Winnipeg had an 18-16 lead at that point, but Calgary still had a chance to potentially win a field goal on their own. After the kickoff, Calgary was able to get the ball at midfield with 12 seconds to go as Jake Maier kept moving Calgary down to hopefully get into field goal range. But the one big play that could have been different if it would happen was that Jake Maier attempted to pass to Jake Maier, but it was dropped. And ultimately, we had one more play before we attempted a field goal. So Calgary was able to get to the Winnipeg 45-yard line on a Markeith Amble's completed pass, which set it up Rene Paredes to force a 52-yard field goal. If Jake Maier, I think, would have caught that ball the play before, Rene Paredes would have had a couple more yards up, and it definitely made a difference because Rene Paredes had a 52-yard field goal attempt for the game. The kick was literally like this short. I guess the air is just a little heavier in Manitoba than it is here in Alberta. So ultimately, Winnipeg wins this one 18-16 in this defensive struggle, dropping Calgary to 1-3 on the season. But considering where I felt a couple weeks ago when Bo Levi Mitchell was put on the 6-game injured list, I'm looking pretty good with Jake Maier. So ultimately, Calgary starts off August with a 1-3 start, but keep in mind those 3 losses were combined by 11 points, so games could have went the other way. So now, if we look at the stats for both sides, well, Jake Maier, he was 30 for 39 in passing, including that 17 straight completed passes to start the game, which is now a franchise record. He threw for 307 yards, so both starts that Jake Maier had over 300 yards, didn't have a touchdown nor an interception. So Jake Maier definitely looked a lot better in the second game on the road in Winnipeg in front of those fans. Rushing the ball, Canadian Carey, he had 8 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown. Leading receiver, Josh Huff led the way again with 6 catches for 92 yards. Kamar Jordan also had 7 catches for 77 yards. Rene Paredes, he was 3 for 4 for kicking. His longest was 39 yards. And that was his first miss of the season, actually. Was that 52-yarder, and that is his career highest, 52 yards. And it was just this short, like just that short. And then Royce Mitchell led the team in tackles with 6 tackles. So Winnipeg side of the ball was Zach Collaros. He was 16 to 25 for 243 yards. He didn't have any touchdowns or interceptions. Andrew Harris, he definitely made an impact back in the Winnipeg lineup. He had 81 yards rushing on 17 carries, including that 1 touchdown. Rasheed Bailey led the way in receiving with 4 catches for 108 yards. Kenny Lawler also had 6 catches for 94 yards. Mark Lego, he was 4 for 4 for 50 yards, but thankfully he took that time count when it mattered, or that could have been a different game. And then Adam Bighill led with 8 tackles, including that 1 forced, fumble recovery on that forced fumble. So that was the game 4, week 4 against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So now if we take a look at the stats and standings, well, the standings, how the league looks after August, well, it's still hard to say. Keep in mind we didn't have a preseason, but right now, the West Division, I think the Saskatchewan Rough Riders look like the best team in the league at 3-0. Winnipeg is 3-1 for second in the West. BC, they were 2-2 for third in the West. And then in fourth place was the Edmonton Elks. They're 1-2, but they had that 1 game postponed due to COVID. And then my Calgary Stampeders are 1-3, but we were in every game. So that's the West side. Right now, I'm going to say Saskatchewan, Winnipeg look like they're the cream of the crop. In the West, out East, it's still hard to say. Toronto was in first at 2-1, but then they had their game postponed because they were scheduled to play the Edmonton Elks. That got postponed due to COVID. But Toronto is looking pretty good. And then you got question marks afterwards, because you had the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They're 1-2. They have a slow start. Ottawa Red Blacks, I'm going to say they look like their offense is definitely stalled. They're 1-2, and then the Montreal Alouettes are 1-2. So it's still hard to really gauge who is the best team in the East. But I think Saskatchewan, Winnipeg are the top 2 teams in the league right now. But the West teams, given with the COVID restrictions and that, had a very, very home-heavy schedule, including my Calgary Stampeders. So that is the standing story. So if you look at the stats, before we get to the looking ahead portion of the video, well, when it comes to passing, well, if you look at Bo, he was 44 for 73 in passing. He had 542 yards with only 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions, but maybe that broken fibula also played a role, because Bo had shoulder issues and he had that fixed in the offseason. But Jake Maier, listen to these numbers for 2 starts. For his first 2 fresh starts, he's 46 for 68 for passing for 611 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So Bo only has a 60.3 passing percentage, while Jake Maier has 67.6 passing percentage. In both games he has thrown for over 300 yards. Leading rusher is Kadeem Carey. He has 251 yards on 51 carries for an average 4.9 yards, and he has 3 touchdowns. Longest only 17. Leading receiver actually right now is Josh Huff. He has 306 yards for 19 pass receptions, and he does have actually no touchdowns. Actually, the receiver with the most touchdowns is 2, and it's the only receiver with 2 touchdowns is Kamar Jordan, who has 16 receptions for 234 yards. But the other receiver who's second is Markeith Animals. He has 253 yards on 17 receptions. And then the lead tackler right now actually is Darnell Sankey with 20. And then when it comes to kick returns, he had Sean Riley in the first game, but then he got cut by Malik Henry. But kick returns, Malik Henry averages 23.8 yards. Punt returns, Malik Henry also averages 13.2 yards. And then I mentioned Rene Paredes, he's 12 for 13 on field goals. The only one he missed was that 52-yarder that we asked him to, that was just short in Winnipeg, but his longest was 52 yards, 92.3 percentage. And then punting, Cody Grace, the guy that we drafted in the global draft from Australia, he is averaging 56 45.6 yards punting. I'm going to say he's done an admirable job for Rob Maier. So now to look ahead, before I close out this video, there's what Calgary has in store for September. And I'm going to say they're going to have a little bit of an easier schedule in September for a couple of reasons. Well, the first game in September is the big Labor Day Classic for Week 5. That will be on Monday, September the 6th, as the Calgary Stampeders will be hosting the Edmonton Elks. That's always a 2:30 kickoff in McMahon Stadium. Always look forward to that game. Then the next game will be on Saturday, September 11th. Week 6 will be the Labor Day rematch, as myself and the Calgary Stampeders will be heading up the road up into Edmonton, as the Calgary Stampeders will take on the Edmonton Elks again up in Edmonton at the Brickfield at Commonwealth Stadium, 5 p.m. kickoff. I'm going to say, looking at that schedule, it's very winnable, because Calgary's definitely had a more favorable matchup with the Edmonton Elks over the years, or Eskimos in retrospect, as I'll say. And the fact that Edmonton is still coming off of that COVID shutdown, I think they might be a little rusty, and Edmonton, kind of just like Ottawa, has been struggling to find the offense at the start of the season. So I'm going to say those two games look very winnable. But then the last game in September, on Friday, September 7th, this will be Week 7, as the Calgary Stampeders will be on the road in Hamilton to take on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That'll be at Tim Hortons Field, 5 p.m. kickoff. If Hamilton can get their game going, this is going to be a tough game. And historically, Calgary's had a tougher time winning in Hamilton. So, and then Week 8 they have a bye, and each team has 2 byes. So Calgary only has 3 games to play in September. So I'm going to probably wait till Week 8 is done before I come back with the next episode of my Calgary Stampeders this month. But that's how things look in the Calgary Stampeders for September. So I'm going to say right now, I am feeling a little more at ease with the situation with Bo Levi Mitchell and the injury. Given how Jake Maier's played, we had 3 losses. Yeah, it sucks, but it's only been a combined by 11 points. I think if we can clean up a few penalties and maybe get a few more plays on offense, I think this team is able to reload. And the fact that we were able to play tough with Winnipeg, in Winnipeg without Bo, I am not totally concerned yet, but I'll put more stock into more teams after September, because usually Labor Day is the gauge. But the fact that the season just started, Labor Day has come much quicker this year. We'll have a better idea how the team looks after the end of September for all teams, I would say. So we'll take a look more on stats throughout the league in the next episode, because I'll have one less game to talk about. So yes, my Calgary Stampeders is back. It's definitely nice that football is back, and I've been able to get back into the stands and actually plan a few football trips, as I already have everything booked. I'll be taking the bus this year, because car rentals are a lot more expensive, as I'll be heading up to Edmonton for the Labor Day rematch. And I'm thinking about Thanksgiving weekend. I will be going to the, it's not officially booked yet, but at least have my room booked, that with free cancellation. I am thinking about going to Regina to catch the Stampeders in Regina, so at least I'm booking some football trips. So anyway, to close out, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of the Flames, Edmonton Roughnecks, Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, recapping games and stories. But I also do a variety of non-sports content when I've had time, which hasn't been much of lately, with personal blogs, attempt to comedy. I also do share my experience time on the road or at a sport event, and I am planning on capturing those Jets again at the Labor Day Classic next week when we take on the Elks and beat the Elks. They may change their name, but they're still always going to lose on Labor Day, right? So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you do, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below. And then make sure you check out Brett Hornby Shorts, where I've been putting my YouTube shorts exclusively on that channel, where I do my quick post-game recaps, but on this main channel I do my game day posts. So I'm definitely glad I'm back. Calgary Stampeders and CFL is back. Go Stamps, go Stamps, go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And actually, as of this recording, Bo actually got taken off of the 6-game injury list and is practicing. So maybe Bo is going to come back a little sooner than anticipated. But with Jake Maier, we have depth. So watch out. You just think when the Stampeders are out? Nope. I like that, but I don't think the rest of the CFL does. But go Stamps, go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.